We have with us Mr. Richie McNeill. Please give him a round of applause. Now, we're calling this session, quite a little bit jokingly, From Raves to Riches. And the idea being that Richie, for the past 25 years, has been really passionate and working in the dance music industry. As everyone in this room probably knows, this year Richie and his partner Drew Orez and the rest of the guys at Totem One Love sold to a US billionaire for $95 million. And it is a phenomenal Australian success story. So what we're going to do today is kind of like go back through the beginnings of the story and an area that we haven't really covered much in EMC, which we're going to kind of look at the history of clubbing in Melbourne through the 90s and 2000s.
Yep.
Richie's going to...
Late 80s,
yeah. Think all the way back. So Richie, I'll kind of start off with, let's start at the very, very beginning. Kind of where did your kind of passion or love for dance music originally come from?
Well, I've got two older sisters. We're all 5 years apart, so I was kind of tortured by my sisters in the 70s and 80s with all sorts of music, from Australian rock to Madonna and all this sort of stuff. And I went to a high school for a couple of years before I was thrown out, and I ended up going to a private school after that. But in year 8, in junior high school, we started breakdancing. Like Beat Street came out, and Run DMC and Public Enemy and all that sort of stuff. And my first DJ gig, basically in year 8, I played at a school social on a Friday night. We used to have them in the high school hall. We used to have them every 2 months. And halfway through the year, I got to sort of DJ, and I was playing off a double tape deck and a belt drive turntable, just cutting things from left to right, not doing any of that sort of stuff. And I was sort of into hip hop, and then in the mid 80s, when I went to a private school because I got asked to leave the high school I was in, and I sort of discovered The Cure and Depeche Mode and that sort of stuff, and a lot of punk stuff like Exploited and Sex Pistols and things like that. And and I used to catch the bus with a friend of mine who was best friend that went to the same school as me in the end and lived next door, and he was into, it was really weird because he was into Iron Maiden and Metallica and all this sort of stuff. So I had a lot of musical people around me that sort of gave me influence. And then in high school, in end of year 11, there was a place called Tok H, which was quite a famous underage haunt at Track in Toorak. And I used to go there on Friday night, sort of towards the end of year 11, and then managed, one of my mates had a friend who had this DJ called Steve Robbins, who was one of the really influential early acid house DJs that I used to love, who used to play for me in the years succeeding. But he used to sneak us into a place called Checkpoint Charlie, which is now called the Emerson. Mm-hmm. And there was Zuzu's and there was Inflation, all these clubs that had sort of just started that were around. And King Street at that period, and it was the clubbing district in Melbourne. And it was just a row of nightclubs, and we used to go there on Saturday night and get snuck into Inflation. And I remember the first time I went to Checkpoint Charlie when it opened, which was kind of like, it was 80. Yeah, it was 89, so the start of 89, end of 88, that summer. And I remember walking into, you've got to hear this guy, Steve. And Steve snuck us in the back door, and I could hear like, doof, doof, doof. And then walked inside, and it was like this track called Oochie Coochie by Baby Ford. And then it was like We Are Future, this acid house track came on, and the place was just going bananas. And it was only like 300 people, but I just kind of walked in, and I was like, 17-year-old, I just went like, wow, this is crazy. And then from that point, kept going to Inflation on Saturday nights, kept going to Chasers, kept going to, and then Chasers halfway through. I was halfway through high school. The last year, it was HSC back then. It's called something else now. And I got to know from going to Chasers regularly, I got to know the busboy manager, and basically just hassled him for a job for long enough, and got a job towards the end. And I used to go out in the weekends, and my mum thought I was either at a friend's house or, going out to a pub. She knew I used to drink and stuff, and said if you ever, my dad sometimes came and picked me up from a few places when I was in trouble and had no money and was stranded.
So you lied to her and didn't tell you you had a job in the clubs?
Yeah, for the last half of high school, she would have killed me because, I was supposed to be studying physics and maths A and computer science and all that sort of stuff. And then that summer, when I finished high school in that summer of 89, that class of 89, basically I just went crazy. Like I had applied to get into the Air Force. I was going to be a pilot. I saw Top Gun like a lot of us did, in the 80s. And I had this thing, I wanted to be an astronaut and stuff. And there was an Australian that had just been in the space shuttle that blew up, although that wasn't one of the reasons why I wanted to be a pilot, but an astronaut. But I applied to get into this Defence Academy position. It was like 3 years at the academy in Canberra. I'm doing an engineering degree, and then you basically did a year's training down at Point Cook in Melbourne, just down at Laverton, and after 4 years you come out as a flight lieutenant and you're flying Hornets or F-111. So that's what I wanted to do. Had my heart set on it. I wanted to do that, but then at the same time I was really entrenched in going out to clubs and listening to Acid House and that sort of thing. And then I got my HSC results at the end of January, and they weren't as, they were like 70s. I was trying to get 90s to get into this Air Force course, but basically I'd sort of stuffed it up from going out too much. That's probably why I think I started, one of the exams I studied like 3 days before, and it was a pretty crazy time for me.
And how did the whole promoting stuff kind of start off then?
Well, I was a bit depressed when I got into software engineering, so I got my first choice at uni, but I didn't get into the pilot thing. I got down to 200 people out of 8,000 applicants, and they were taking 50. I was a bit depressed. I didn't pass the interview, basically. Psychologically, I wasn't the profile for the Air Force, apparently. So
that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, it actually turned out okay in the end. And then, yeah, like that year, I got into uni, so I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to uni, I'm going to study software engineering. So I started doing that, and I was going out quite a lot. I was working at Chase's, and now as a uni student, I was working there 5 nights a week, and that was incredible. Like Wednesday night was hard and fast, it was all rock. Thursday was fat. Bobby Love is still probably the best funk and R&B and disco DJ of all time in Australia. Friday was Acid House night. Saturday was like Euro disco, like Black Box and all that sort of stuff, 49ers and a lot of Italian stuff. And Sunday was Delirium. It was an old school, like a retro 80s thing. So I was subjected to the most wide range of music all week for that whole year. And again, at uni, my heart was in it, but it was kind of, I was just doing it and I didn't really enjoy it. And I was buying records at the time, Charlie Key, Paul Seedley, all these great DJs in Melbourne. Mark James from Future, he came in on the Friday night and started playing about midway through that year, and I'd go in the DJ box and get all these Scotch and Coke glasses and clean them up and clean the ashtrays and always, what's that track, and would write it down, and then I'd go to Central Station and just wait on the door. We'd go and have breakfast in the morning, and then I'd go to Central Station on Saturday morning and wait for them to open and buy those records I'd heard from the night before. And then this other DJ was doing the same thing. I kept meeting this other DJ, and he was a busboy, but he was from Warehouse. His name was Willie Tell, and Thomas Keelan, we became really good friends. And we formed a really strong friendship, and then I started going back to his house after the Central Station Saturday early morning shop, and we'd play records all afternoon, and it got to a point where, we both wanted to get gigs, but we couldn't get big gigs. He was technically a lot better than me, but I thought I had better sense of music because I was a bit wilder and more on the level with the crowd. So I kind of went, well, we're not going to get gigs unless we do our own thing. So I went to a bar called the Star Bar in Clarendon Street, South Melbourne, and asked to speak to the owner. He kind of looked at me, and I was quite skinny back then and pretty much running on Coca-Cola and no sleep. And he said, all right, I'll give you a go. I said, look, just give me 4 weeks. So because I was a computer programmer, I wrote this program that I could put this mailing list together that I called Interface. And back then, no one had mobiles. It was like 018, 019. It was all analog numbers. But really, not many people had mobile phones, those analog phones. They had postal addresses. So I wrote this program that did all the labeling and had my friends come over. We made a really horrible fly. It was like purple and fluoro green. It was the most disgusting, worst colours ever. I gave myself a DJ name.
It was the early 90s.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It was. Yeah, this was 1990, and I came out with a DJ name. My name was Mr. Rubbish. I'm not going to say why or the story to do with me in a rubbish bag, but basically, so I had my first gig and I put it on myself, and because I was bussing in the club and I was writing down, there was a lot of industry peeps, even people that were coming on Saturday night, quite often a lot of them would come on Friday, and there was regular, so I was writing all these addresses down, did this mail out thing, and we had like 700 people turn up, and it was only a place for like 300 people.
And you did a mail out, like a physical mail out?
Yeah, I wrote a newsletter called Interface, like, hi everyone, with my name on it, and I signed and made like 500 photocopies and printed the labels, and the label printer I bought for $80 on the trading post broke halfway through, had to start printing it again, reline up the paper, stuck all the labels on. Friends came over, we had pizza and drank beers and just kind of watched TV and stuffed them all up, and then went to the post office and they said, anything over 500 you've got to go to the mail centre because it's too big for us. So I had to drive to Box Hill and go to a mail centre, and so anyway, it turned up, it was really successful, and it was good. And after the second week, I started inviting other DJs from other clubs that I was aspiring to come and play, like Mark James and Terence Ho, H2O, Jason Rudeboy, these sort of guys. And then they basically came and played, and then they started sort of, reciprocating the shows, and that's how I basically got my career off as a DJ, which I ran through university. And then I changed my name from Mr. Rubbish. My friend goes, "You've got to get more professional. Mr. Rubbish is crap, so come up with something else." And then a friend of mine started calling me Richie Rich. It was a bit of a nickname, so...
Richie Rich kind of stuck.
It kind of stuck, yeah, from that point onwards, and started playing. And then Mark James started a club called Pure at the back of the Palace in '91, and that was the first real rave club in Melbourne. There was plenty of acid house nights playing Chicago House and that sort of thing, and New Water and all sorts of stuff like that, but there wasn't any... the rave scene hadn't started yet. There wasn't really any raves. And a few things sort of popped up that I started playing at, and I was still working at... being a busboy. Was at Chasers for a year and a half and got fired from there. And
was this around the time you started working at Mushroom Records? Do you want to kind of explain how that came about?
Well, well, that was an interesting thing. I was basically playing at Mark's Club Pure, and Colin Daniels, who's now the CEO of Inertia, and Ashley Sellers, who's the founder of Inertia, used to work for me, worked for us. And in '92, the Mushroom guys were just crazy. They used to come down after work. They'd go out for dinner on Friday nights from their Port Melbourne offices and come to this rave club. And I got talking to Colin Daniels and sort of said to him, "Oh, look, I'd love a job." I was trying to get all friendly with him, a job. And Willie Tell and I were ordering records from the back of Mixmag. There was the listings of all the different record stores. And we were ordering from Eastern Bloc and Hard to Find and this record store called Vinyl Solution. And they had a label that had Bizarre Inc., which was quite big in the early 90s. And I worked out from talking to Colin, he said, we do Vinyl Solution. I went, I buy records from the shop downstairs. Can I put them in your boxes on Friday, and then I can come pick them up from your Port Melbourne warehouse on Monday? So he said, all right. So we went and did that. And we used to kind of hang out with Colin and play him all the stuff that we'd ordered. And the relationship formed, and then after badgering them for sort of 3 or 4 months, they finally gave me a job. They just thought I was a party monster. They were like, "This guy, it's just kids are DJs, uni's crazy. He's out till 7 p.m. on Sunday. He can't work for us." And then so I said, "Just give me a shot in the warehouse." So I basically would do warehouse packaging boxes in the morning and in the afternoon sometimes, while I was still doing uni. And I gave up the busing then because I'd moved from late nights to that, and started DJing a bit more on the weekends. And I broke the record for packing the most number of boxes in like a day. And then Colin Daniels and they had a thing on the wall that was like the date, who did it, and the number of boxes that they'd packed in one day. And I just kept knocking my record off after a couple of months. And then Colin went to this music seminar, which is no longer around, called New Music Seminar in New York. It was always in July or August. It was in winter. And because I was DJing interstate, every time you go and DJ interstate, you'd always go to the record store in town and find music that city had latched onto that you hadn't actually discovered yet. So HMC's partner in Dirty House and Juice, Theo, was the buyer, and Tony from Central Station there. They'd always go in and they'd have this crazy techno stuff that we didn't have, and we'd swap notes on records, and I'd come back and I was telling Colin, "Oh, you've got to get this record, order heaps of copies. Miggy from Dada in Perth wants 100. Tony from Central Adelaide and Theo want 50 copies, And I was like a quasi sort of salesman operating from the warehouse and from my gigs on the weekends. And then when Colin went away, he said, "Why don't you come upstairs for the 2 weeks I'm away?" and showed me how to... Back then, there was no internet. Everything was on the fax, and he'd get the promos, and we'd play them down the phone line to Ashley, who was the buyer for H&B in Pitt Street, and we'd play the records down and get the orders and fax the orders through, and they'd come over the weekend and send them out, and then the new promos would be in that shipment for the next weekend, and that was the system. And we subscribed to this newsletter called Brand X. There was a girl in New York called Moneypenny that had this really good underground 3-page fax called Brand X, which for anyone that was in the techno and rave scene in the early 90s, it was the pinnacle guide weekly, and the Brand X Top 50 was considered like I was talking to Matthew Adele about it yesterday, it was considered the thing to track down, the tracks to track down. And
so she'd send out a fax every week at the top.
Every Sunday night from New York, and it would come in Monday morning, and I'd get into the MDS office, and there was this fax, and I'd be like, "Okay, know that track, don't know that one, order." And we used to order from that, order over the phone. And then when Colin came back, he just said, look, you've done a good job. Do you want to go part-time in sales and get out of the warehouse? I was like, yes. So I got out of the warehouse, finally.
This was about 92, 93?
Yeah, it was 92. Yeah, started 92. And then, I was into my third year of uni. I was at the crossroads. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, I was quite bored. I was good at it, but I was quite bored at the computer stuff. And then Colin said, I've got to go mushroom setting an office up in the UK for Kylie Minogue and Danny Minogue and stuff, and do you want to come and work full time? So I was kind of made the manager. I was pretty young. I was like 21 or 20 or something. And
this was a time also when Mushroom Dance Records was hugely influential in that space. They had a lot of the key artists.
yeah, we had two competitors. It was Shock and Gabby, who now does promo for One Love and stuff. Is she here? Gabby? No. I used to hate Gabby because Colossal used to parallel import everything that we did. Like we signed Junior Boy's Own and we did Underworld albums. We signed Hard Hands as a label. We had a hit with John Lydon, the Sex Pistols one, Open Up, and that went to Liberation because we were the breeding ground and would bring in all the independent stuff and it would go to the major label, whether it was White or Mushroom or Liberate, it would go to that label. Did the KLF, we did Tommy Boy, De La Soul went to Mushroom, we did Profile, Run DMC went to Mushroom. We did Hard Hands, Left Field went to Mushroom. We did Instinct, Moby Go, famous track I used to play at the raves. Moby went to Mushroom for 3 or 4 albums. So we were pretty much dominating. It was great. Yeah, Nick Dunshay, who's at Liberator now, and I were like fierce competitors, and we were just signing independent music, and it was a really great time from 91 to 95. It was the explosion of the Utello house scene and the rave stuff. And
then what happened in 95? You decided to, Mushroom sound like a pretty dream job for you.
Yeah.
So you decided to kind of give it all up in about 95.
Yeah, well, I was working Mushroom full time. I was DJing on the weekends, like 2 nights a week, and I was quite a successful rave DJ back then, and I quite often would get the morning sets at like 5 or 6 in the morning. I'd turn up on Sunday going, oh, what's it going to be like? And it's 5 a.m, there's 5,000 people in a shed somewhere, whether it's an Altona sports centre, and the crowd at that time of the morning, it's interesting. The light comes in, you actually get to see what they look like. And I was always playing these uplifting trance sets, and because I was at MDS as well, I was starting to tour, Paul Van Dyke. I was getting Paul Van Dyke tapes, dub mission tapes from the MFS guys when he was a nobody. Laurent Garnier was on Fnac, FCOM, and his first album came out, which we sold like 200 copies of, and I was getting these tapes of Laurent Garnier going, this guy's fucking unbelievable. And so I was booking people to come and play at my at the hardware events that I was doing, that I started doing in 91, from mixtapes, not really from DJ Mag or from record sales or whatever. It was actually from, Carl Cox came and I saw him for the first time, the first ever DJ on 3 decks, and I was like, this guy's unbelievable. Who is this guy? And then at the end of 95, I was touring, doing tours, like we'd had Paul Van Dyke and Sven Vath and Richie Horton and Claude Young and all these sorts of people that basically I was exhausted. I was getting sick all the time, and I went and saw a doctor, said, what's going on with me? He said, look, I was getting sick every 3 or 4 weeks. He goes, your immune system's just shit. You either got to be a DJ and play nights and stay in that pattern, but they're floating between the two, trying to keep a 9 to 5 thing and whatever. So I just got burnt out, broke up with my girlfriend at that point, as girls can do, ruin your life, and I was pretty depressed for a little while, and then just kind of wanted to find my feet and work out what I wanted to do, and then I decided, I want to open a record store, and I had some of the relationships from Mushroom calling me, going, what are you doing, come work for us in Germany, and Polygram in Sydney offered me a job up there, and this and that, and I went, nah. And so I decided to open a record store.
And this was Hardware Records?
Hardware Records, which was in 95, and then I opened another store. It was half a store with a promoter called Mark Bundy. It was called Red Light District. That was in Adelaide. And I did that, and some of the good relationships I had from Mushroom continued, whether it was managers of acts, or whether it was labels or distributors, and started doing a little bit of distribution because the person that replaced me just wasn't the same. And then at that point, I was running these hardware parties, these raves, 4,000 or 5,000 people down at the Docklands.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the promoting side, because that kind of went in parallel with your record store and Mushroom.
Yeah, well, that started in New Year's Eve of 91 when I'd started DJing, and there was a few acid house parties that had started, like Bology. There was another one I can't remember. And there was these gay dance parties. It was like they were the first raves in Melbourne, were actually Winter Days, and which was in June on the long weekend, and Red Raw, and they were both gay dance parties, and they'd been partying. They were way advanced of us. They'd been partying since like 1987, doing these like gay dance parties. And I went to one, just not by default, just by accident. And then basically I walked in, I was like, holy shit, this is like incredible. And their productions were great, and they always paid a high ticket price, like 80 or 90 bucks. And I'd spoken to the Also Foundation, said, I'm doing these rave parties, you're on the Sunday, why don't we share production and I'll do the Saturday night? Completely different crowd, but same venue. And so we had this lease that we took out, a combined lease on Shed 14, which was down at the Docklands, and ran these raves for a while through the mid, from 92, 93, 95, well, actually from 93 it was. And then at one point, and so I was doing this March Labor Day one every year, which was our biggest one. The one in January was good, but the June one was freezing cold. Winter, the one on the Saturday, the Queen's birthday weekend, and it was, I'm talking freezing cold. I tried to hire gas heaters and everything to warm it up, but it was like freezing cold, like 4 degrees and stuff at night, and you got Jeff Mills like pumping out techno and 5,000 people. Like, I think the biggest event we did there was 6,000. And, you know, artists would come from overseas and just go, what the fuck is going on here? And they actually Melbourne got termed for a while, like Techno City. For a while, yeah, like on the world circuit.
So all the hardware parties were kind of, so mid-90s now. I kind of want to move forward a tiny bit to around 97 to the Apollo Festival, which was Australia's very first ever dance festival.
Yeah, well, what happened was the Big Day Out, Vivian Lees was a bit of an inspiration for me, and Vivian Lees was best friends with Scott Murphy, my boss at MDS, and he would always come in and say, what have you got? And we'd say, we've got the Prodigy on Beggar's Banquet, we've got this, we've got that. So we had a bit of a fairly strong influence into the Big Day Out's Boiler Room, and with Bjork and things like that in the early days, because, you know, back then you'd sell a lot of albums, and if you got on the Big Day Out, the support from Triple J, you would actually be the difference between selling 5,000 albums. I think the Underwood album we bought Dub No Bass out, it had sold 5,000 albums. And then when they came out and were added to the Big Day Out, and the second album, Second Toughest of the Infants, came out, the first album went to like 40,000. Like, you could actually sell a lot of records back then. And so I always wanted to do a festival, and it was the inspiration of the Big Day Out. And then Vivian Lees was always like, yeah, you know, I want to do this thing with Orbital, Chemical Brothers, and Underworld. And I was like, oh, yes, this is my dream, you know. And we just talked and talked and talked about it, and nothing ever came about. And he kept saying it. I went, yeah, you just keep saying this, Vivian. And I just realised he was talking shit and it wasn't going to happen. And then I had a couple of friends that were touring at Gemco, a guy called Terry Thompson, and he's moved back to the UK, got out of the scene about 10 years ago. But he was a great promoter. We both had exactly the same vision, and we were friends, and we wanted to start a dance festival. And this was in the end of 97. And then we thought, well, shit, A, we've got to have money to do that, and B, how do we do it? Like, we've got a lot of acts between us, me with the techno stuff and some of the trance acts, and him with a lot of the house and club stuff. He's doing Jeremy Healy and DJ Sneak and all this, Derek Carter and all this sort of stuff. So I was like, well, let's try and put it together. And then we went and saw Michael Koppel, and because his partner, it was a lawyer, and he was Michael Koppel's friend, and so one of the partners in it was a family friend of Koppel. So we kind of had this meeting. We walk into this office, and this legendary like promoter who's one of my heroes, sitting on the other side, and I thought, you know, he was like the big fat businessman on the other side of the table, but he wasn't fat. Don't please. Is this going to
big
hear
businessman?
this?
Yeah, it's going to be taped.
You're not fat. But like, he just looked like this, you know, like the picture I had in my head of one of those, you know, big record company executive type people. And he was the nicest guy I ever met. We just had a great conversation for 3 hours. We'd booked in an hour, and we decided at the end of it, let's do it. So we started putting budgets together.
What was that first lineup for Apollo?
It was interesting because Daft Punk put out this single called Defunk, which was on Soma, and I'd been, and Mushroom was doing Soma, and I'd actually had Stuart Nord, Slam, the owners of the label, come and DJ for me, and they're like, these French guys are great. And we booked them for, it was like £10,000 or something. And it was 2 shows. The festival was on one Saturday and the following Saturday. And we tried to get little side shows in Brisbane and wherever else.
And you had Basement Jacks on there as well?
We had Basement Jacks, yeah.
How much were they?
I think they were like £3,000, something like that. Jeff Mills was like $2,000 US. The festival was $89. It started at $69. We invented the first, second, third release back then. We didn't have industry tickets at that point.
It also was a festival, though, that was ahead of its time. Like, it failed.
It failed
financially. Yeah,
we lost a lot of money. I played for Ming. I played for a bell at a party called Happy Valley up here, and I used to play a lot around the country. And it was at this Cataract Scout Park. It was, to be honest, it was too far away from. It was a great idea to do the festival, but to try and get 15,000 people at that point from Sydney in 98 in February to drive an hour and a half to a skate park that was on dirt roads and shitty parking, and you know, it was just impossible. So that failed a lot. We lost a lot of money. Well, I didn't lose much. Copper lost most of it. And I kind of felt indebted to him after that because I don't like losing people money. So I sort of stayed in contact with him and said, look, the next year, do you want to do it again? Because, you know, Daft Punk, the album came out. I booked it in August, and the album came out homework with all the massive tracks on it in November, just before Christmas. And it was the biggest freaking dance album, biggest thing that had ever come out in electronic music to date. You know, it was bigger than the Prodigy's Fat of the Land and that we had, and, which was their breakout album in '95 or whatever. And so we were like, holy shit.
And did you
We
want
thought heaps of people were going to come.
Did he want to do the festival with you again?
No, he said no. And he said, but if you want to do it, you can pay me some money that I lost, pay me some money back. Like, you can buy it off me, the name. And I was like, fuck that. And then so basically, I'll start something else. But then I didn't know what to do. And I'd been running these raves at the Docklands for like 5 or 6 years. And then Future, about 3 years after that, had got into another. The Docklands is all developed now, but there was 2 sections that were being developed over a 15-year period at 2 different real estate agents. And they'd sort of backdoored and got into a venue, Shed 2, and I was in Shed 14. And their agent sneakily had put a hold on on the shed that I'd actually had a lease on, but then after a certain time was on a month by month because of the development could happen at any stage, and they told us that for 7 years. And so we'd both booked the same shed, and then the real estate agent for them and the real estate agent for me were like, well, if we've got a pull-out clause 30 days, and this is November, and we're talking about a show in March, we're going to tear up the contracts. If you guys try and work it out. So I had a meeting with Mark, and I'd been playing for Mark at clubs and raves over the years, and he'd been playing for me, and we got along really well. So we decided to do a new event, and I was in the record store at the back doing some work on the computer, and Simon Digby had a Frankie Goes to Hollywood record on in the background, which was 2 Tribes, and said, why don't we call it 2 Tribes? I was like, fucking great, because they wanted to call it Tribal Gathering, and there was one in the UK, and I didn't want to steal someone else's name, so we came up with this thing, and then we're like, we've got the name, 2 Tribes. And so we basically did that.
And then 2 Tribes then went on successfully for 9 or 10 years.
Yeah, it started in March '99. We had such a great successful event because we used to tear each other's posters down and steal each other's flyers and all that competitive stuff that used to go on. And it was just, we actually worked out that the marketing money that they spent on the previous March weekends doing their club gig and the March weekend, previous week, long weekends I'd spent doing my techno show, the combined total of the two, when we actually started working together, it was a third of the combined total of the two. So it was just cheaper to not compete. So we didn't have to print like extra posters and extra flyers because we were pulling each other's stuff down all the time because of the poster wars of the mid-90s poster wars, which were really famous back then.
And so then why did 2 Tribes kind of finish up?
Look, we ran it for 9 years. We were just moving in different music directions. I was more into techno stuff still and more, I wanted to do more underground stuff, as in music artists on the thing. There was Brett Robinson came across because he was working for Kadinsky's dance thing, which was called Agent Mad, and which ended up kind of coming and going. But he came across from when Agent Mad finished up in 2001, I think it was, that they went under. He came across and Mark took a back seat. And Mark for me was the connecting. When I was working together with Future on 2 Tribes, like Mark was the connection. I didn't really have a connection with the others, just because of we just shared that music. We shared the passion and the programming and that sort of thing. So when we're arguing about decor and the experience and those sorts of things with Mr. Budget, Mark and I were always like ganging up on Mr. Budget and going, nah, you've got to do this. And we've got to, hang up fluoro stuff and do this and that. And
was that hard to walk away from? I imagine it would have been pretty financially successful.
It was. I had hardware and I'd started a new company, Tonum Industries, with Simon Coyle and Brad Drummond, who got poached from us to go and do Sensation. IDT sort of poached him. And it was 2 Tribes was like 80% of our income, so it was a big thing to walk away from. I remember sending a fax. My lawyer sent a fax to their lawyer and a letter saying, because we were halfway on the trademark, that it was over. And then 3 days later, their office burned down. I had nothing to do with it, but it's funny because Mark's Records made it out, but all their paperwork was destroyed. And people ringing me up saying like, it was really funny. They were ringing me up saying, where were you like on Wednesday night? And I was like, I don't smoke, right? So I was like, I was smoking a cigarette on my balcony, which was funny. But it was a bit depressing, Like I was actually quite scared, I had this behemoth, which was Future, that had, 2 Tribes for them was such a small portion of their income because they had this Summer Days thing going around the country, and so they were in a much stronger position, and so
that cleared the decks for you then to launch Stereosonic.
Yeah, well, I mean, Peter Raff, when I was a bussy at 17, Peter Raff is like the Peter Geisha from New York, like Studio 54. He's a real true promoter in the sense, like he was promoting clubs in the mid 80s and all the way through, wears really bad clothes and has white hair, but can disco dance and do this twirl thing. Like, it was amazing. He was one of my heroes as well. Like, he was the real, disco promoter. And so I had a really strong relationship with him. Draw, not so much, because Draw had the Prince band room and would always bitch about me because I didn't want to pay $1 a head for a gig that I was doing there when the Hi-Fi would give it to me for free or Billboard. So we had a love-hate relationship. Draw, he wanted my gigs, was nice to me, but he hated me because I would never pay him his $1 per head commission on the tickets for the attendance and stuff. And Frank was a designer doing a lot of artwork, and between the three of them, they'd set up this One Love club network, and so when I walked away, I kind of had this plan. I said to Simon, we'll put this festival together, but we've got to work with these guys, you could see between the two of us and Future that we would make a really good team and we'd be a really strong force. And I went to Raph, and Raph was into it. We'd go to a meeting, and then it was Raph was into it and Frank was into it, but Draw wasn't. Then the next meeting, Draw was into it and Frank was into it, but Raph wasn't because the budget didn't look right. And after 4 months of bullshit and like yeses and nos, and it was like politically lobbying, trying to get these guys all on the same page. Simon and I walked away. We were just like, well, we're going to go and do it ourselves. And at that point, they thought about it for a week and said, we're in. And then that's when the first Stereosonic happened.
Which was about 2007, Melbourne only?
Melbourne only, yeah.
And then 2008 expanded to...
2008, we went to Adelaide, Perth and Brisbane. And we tried to go to Sydney, but the venue was blocked by another promoter, so we couldn't get the venue. And we did these satellite shows, 4 or 5 shows around the country, like in Sydney at the Metro and Enmore and that sort of thing. And we had Global Gathering on the same weekend. They tried to put us out of business,
which is
basically.
Future's event.
Yes.
And who won?
They didn't win, no. No. Then we got called in for a meeting after that, like, we should work together more and not clash each other's dates. I was like, I left you like the March, February run. You could have that. After 10 years of building that up, I'm doing my own thing. How about you just stay away from our stuff? And then, it was a new era. We had the respect that I guess that wasn't there towards the end of my relationship kind of developed, and then we just continued to do our own thing, and it just grew. And my thing was I was harnessing a lot of energy from media, from other promoters around the country, from DJs, from a lot of people that were just like, there needs to be a change. And I think we've kind of helped lead a change.
I imagine then with Stereo doing really well and selling kind of starting to get to hundreds of thousands of tickets around the country, you would have had a lot of interest from people looking to acquire the company. The final suit had been SFX, but was there interest from other companies?
Yeah, funnily enough, like I still felt compelled to pay Michael Koppel back, although it was clear that he was taking most of the financial risk of Apollo in 1998. So I basically, through the years, like he had a lot of shows that I indirectly kind of helped him on when the gig wasn't selling, or when he was doing Massive Attack or Rain Christian or Faithless or this sort of thing. I would help him with giving out comp tickets, or if they needed to fill a venue, I'd give him a hand. And I was this sort of little dance connection that would have lunch every now and again and just talk. And I just said, one day I want to work with you again, and that was just how I wanted it to be. And then we touched base, the festival, we were talking to him along the way. And then what happened was, One Love had a label with Sony that I was never involved in, but we used to work quite tightly with the festival. And Dennis Hanlon and Draw had an argument over royalty statements, and why doesn't your label make money? It was part of that time when labels were not making money. Draw said something about the festival, and he goes, I'm just going to buy the festival. So we actually started talking to Sony, and we sent him the figures and this and that, and we're like, we want $10 million, and they were like, oh, it's too much money. And I'm like, yeah, but you turn over $200 million a year and you only make $1 million. Buy us for 10 and you can make $1 million, you know what I mean? And it just makes sense. So they sort of, after a while, they said no, and we started talking to Michael Koppel, which was for a good 12 or 13 months, and we were just kind of dancing together for 12 months, going through numbers and this and that. And then last year in February, we were having our final lunch, and we thought we got to a price at a point where we were about to do a deal.
And was that far from what SFX eventually paid for it?
Yes. One lesson, sometimes the best deals you do are the ones that you don't do. That's for sure. So it's a saying we're really we're holding to
Live
now.
by.
Because, I mean, Michael's kicking himself now, but basically we had a deal set up, we were going to do it, and then he said in this February lunch, I've got to tell you something, I've been in a 3-month confidentiality clause, I've just sold the company to Live Nation. I'm going to be I'm going to be a percentage of it, but I really want to do this deal. I really want to work with you. I think we'll make a really strong force, best rock promoter, best electronic promoters working together. It'll be an awesome thing for Australasia. And we were like, great. He said, I have to run it by them. If they want to do the deal, great. If they don't, then I can do it myself without them. But I have to run it by them first because that's just the way he struck his deal, which was fair enough. So it just so happened before we were going to our American trip in March last year, like the week before that, like 2 days before that, the guy from Live Nation Dubai, who was the regional guy that was doing Michael's deal, was in town to sort of finalise Michael's deal, had met us, and we had such a great meeting that when we landed in LA on the way to Ultra like last year, we get a call from Michael Rapinoe's office, who's the head guy, saying, come in and see me. So we went in that day, but his wife went into labour, so we didn't actually meet him. We met his acquisitions guy, had a great meeting, met the acquisitions team and a couple of their creative guys, and we were like, this is great, Drew and I were flying on a high, we thought, this is awesome. We love this company. Mark Gillespie from 360, who's a good friend of ours, who does Calvin Harris and stuff. They're on a joint venture with Rock Nation, which is one of the Live Nation companies. So they had started sort of putting their toes in the water with electronic stuff, and Mark's a really great friend of Frank's and stuff. So we kind of felt the Koppel thing was really good. So then we went to Ultra, and Gary, who was on earlier, Destructo, does a hard stage for us. He said we'd organised a meeting for him, and we thought we were meeting to talk about Stereosonic in the coming 6 months and who he wanted to book and what the next thing was. And there's this old guy sitting there, this boxing promoter called Shelley Finkel, telling us Mike Tyson stories, and used to manage Mike Tyson, all this crazy stuff, and draw one of the partners who's the other CEO, he's like a mad sports fan, so he was just like, he was gobsmacked and just like, and me, I was a bit more like, who's this guy, for me it was just all weird. I really kind of freaked out by it. And then at the end of the meeting, he said, how much money do you make and what would you want? And I just looked at Drew, and I just came out with this crazy figure. And he said, sure, no problem. And I was like, I looked at Drew and he looked back at me and we went, okay, shit.
Did you base it on anything, or you just made it up?
No, I just made it up. Basically just made it up. Thought, okay, we're happy with this, but we'll just ask for that. Like, we're sort of here at the moment with these guys, and that we'd be happy with. We were here with one, we're happy with that, but I just went, let's just double what so we asked for this crazy figure, and then he was like, sure, no problem. If all the figures add up and, you're doing what you say you're going to do, then let's have a look at it. Disco Donnie's like there in a pair of bathers, and we're in a hotel room on the thing. He's there in a pair of bathers with a tea towel tied around his head. I thought, who's this lunatic? And it's Disco Donnie, who is like one of the most famous East Coast dance promoters from America, who I absolutely love now. He's an absolute legend. And he was like, yeah, man, you got to come and join us. And I was like, and then Steve Aoki's guys were there, and they were like, sort of becoming part of the fold. And then Gary's like, me and Drew were like, okay. So then we that day we went and had a meeting with Tom Windish, who's got a big agency, Windish Agency, and he's got an apartment there. So we went to his apartment for lunch. It was about 2 o'clock. This meeting with Shelley was like 10 or something. And he goes, how's your day been? And Drew and I were just like, you know what? We don't know what, we're not here. We're just freaking out. Like, and he goes, why? I go, well, we just had this meeting with Live Nation. Thought we were doing this deal with Koppel, and he knows Michael Koppel really well. He's like, oh, Michael's great. I said, but then now it looks like it's going to be Live Nation, but then we just met this Shelley Finkel this morning. He goes, oh, you've got to meet my guys, C3. They just bought half the big day out. These guys are the best. They're my guys. You've got to talk to them before you do anything else. And I looked at Drew and I thought, oh, where's this going? So in the space of like 3 days, we now had 3 companies that were like, as part of this explosion thing.
So an unintentional bidding war.
Looking to acquire, and then I was out. I was at Ultra every day, like from hours after doors till the end, and quite drunk by the end of it. And Draw's texted me, I'm with Joel Zimmerman, and I've just met Charlie from C3, and I was at the Swedish House Mafia gig. We just walked through like this like Bronx ghetto place, and I thought I was going to die. But anyway, Charlie saved me, and I'm in a hotel room just next to the site. Come up. So I grabbed Frank. We were both really drunk. We were super hungry because it was like 11:30, 12 at night. So I went up to this guy's hotel room, and we met Charlie. We had a big chat, and I thought, this guy's really nice. This guy's unreal. And he was like us. He just started promoting his own shows at uni and this and that. And then we were confused. We had good time. We went back to America, Australia. We were really confused. I got invited to this IMS thing that I hadn't been to before, so we went to IMS, did the rounds, went to meet Bob Silliman in New York as the first stop from Spain, and then went to Texas to meet all of Charlie's partners, the C3 guys that were well into their relationship at that point with Big Day Out, and then went back to meet Michael Rapino on the way back to sort of decide what we wanted to do. And we just felt, coupled because that was the thing that was connecting us, and from Melbourne, part of the family, that we'd do that. So we ended up agreeing to go with Live Nation, and we basically went through that process for like 6 months. And the Stereosonic last year was coming up, and that was obviously really successful. And they had a lot of issues where they wanted to extend our period to like, the middle of this year because they had a court case about a ticketing agency in Germany and all this stuff was going on. And we just didn't want to wait anymore. And I was like, I was really torn between actually selling the company because I thought, selling the company is a really big thing. You no longer technically have control.
Were you worried it's going to change everything?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, there was points where I didn't want to do it, and all the other partners were like harassing me and stuff. And then I wanted to do it, and some of the others had thought about whatever. And after meeting Bob Silliman, we just felt like. So what happened was we went through the Live Nation thing, and they wanted to extend the deal, but they wanted to start from the 1st of July last year, but not do a deal till June. And it was just, I was like, you know what? I felt like, not betrayed, but after 6 or 7 months of all the paperwork and accountants and lawyers and that sort of stuff, I just kind of felt that it was a real letdown. And I went, you know what, Drew, I don't want to fucking sell the company anymore. I'm sick of it. Let's just do our thing. And if something happens, something happens. And then it was like the end of, so we all went on Christmas holidays, and it was like the end of January, start of February, Drew got a call, hey, Drew, it's Shelley, what's going on? I hear the deal didn't go through or you guys pulled out. What's happening? So then Drew rang me and goes, what should we do? I said, I don't know, let's ask for this much. and then I don't want to sell anymore kind of thing. Let's just whatever. And so we went back and Shelley, sure enough, the deal memo came through the next day. It was exactly what we talked about. It was a good deal. We, the partners, we said, look, let's go to US this year in March, and so all the other partners could meet the guys, and we just got a really good vibe. They're like, in hindsight, joining Live Nation would have been like joining the army for us. We're joining Bob Silliman, the SFX team. It's like a bunch of pirates, It's like joining the Black Pearl. They're just completely, there's the freedom there for us to do whatever we want. It's our company, but technically it's not. It's shareholders and people that buy shares in the thing, but nothing's changed. We've got the freedom to do what we want, and that was really important. And Pasquale was having a lot of decisions with EDC and was doing his head in what he wanted to do, and we were all talking. I was talking to Duncan, I was talking to Pasquale, talking to Gary. We were all on the phone to each other, like, what are we going to do? Because we were all the 4 main sort of brands that had been kind of approached. And then I met Mike and Laura from Electric Zoo. These guys are amazing, and we just felt in the end, fate, although the Live Nation thing didn't go through, fate in the end was telling us to go to SFX. And
do you still wake up some mornings though and just pinch yourself? It's a pretty amazing story that you've just kind of told us of lots of hard work, lots of nightclubs, lots of late nights, and now you've got a bank account with lots of zeros on the end.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's kind of changed. I'm certainly not driving a Ferrari or a Porsche or anything like that. I've got my little 4-wheel drive, and my wife's got a little Volkswagen, and I think Frank Frank had a nice car before we sold the company. Nothing's really changed. I mean, you go to our office and we still argue over why has the lighting bill gone up from 10,000 to 10.5, and that sort of thing. I still sign all the payments. They don't even sign the payments. They don't even look at our bank accounts. We just have Ernst & Young come in once a month and go through everything. You wouldn't tell if you're a supplier, and there's a few here, I think. You wouldn't tell if you're a supplier and our sponsorship agency, when we're hammering them on prices, that anything's changed. It's like we're still as passionate, and it'd be easy for us to walk away in 2 years' time and go, if we don't agree on something and basically leave and not compete for a year and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, this is something that we've built up, for me, for 25 years. For the other guys, they've been in the business for 25 years as well. And for us to walk away from it or to see it fail, I just couldn't, our pride and stuff, I couldn't allow that to happen, It'd take something pretty drastic for me to not be working for SFX in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
And so what's next for you in terms of, we heard on the festival panel that there's talk of Stereosonic expanding to Asia. SFX's head office and everything is in the US and in New York. Is that somewhere where you can see yourself in the next couple of years?
Yeah, well, I think we're the Australasian office at the moment, and I mean, going into Asia isn't going into Asia just to like make money and whatever. It's going into Asia to try and find the right people that we can bring into the fold. And you know, whether we do joint ventures or however we do it, if the promoters are good and they do a good job, the plan will be to bring them into SFX. And they're doing the same thing out of the Europe office, the ID&T office in Holland, with Belgium and France and that sort of thing. I mean, Bob asked me to come when, yeah, it's a long story, and it's too much for this, but Bob asked me to come this year, and I'm having another baby in February. I'm not, but my partner is. And so our third, and so, you know, we can't fly under a certain period of time, and it was just too rushed to get it happening in December. But with Asia, I want to hang around, to be honest, till June or December next year and get that sort of set up first. And then potentially, yeah, go there for, they want me to sort of help head up their office in America, just to help with the strategy of, they've got all these brands, and there's no one pulling it together at the moment. And sometimes some of the brands are going into territories too close to the other brands, like time frame and competing and this and that, and they just need someone to help sort of coordinate that on a global level, the working together scenario, and also you know, with agents and talent and that sort of thing, try and sort of, you know, build up some runs and things like that. And
awesome. Hey, listen, I think we're at the end of our time. Everyone, please give it up for Richie McNeill.